Okay, welcome everyone. This is the KubeVirt community meeting of 30th of September 2020. Before starting, I just wanted to, well, there is a new agenda item, let's say, that we will try to run weekly is introductions. If anyone is new to the call and wants to introduce themselves, I don't quickly see anyone new. Anyone new? No? Okay. Anyone wants to say hi? Last week we had some new people and we didn't introduce them. Anyway, also another reminder that to add agenda items to the document, just join the KubeVirt app and you will have edit access automatically. And with that said, let's get started. We have two topics in the agenda. Arthur, you have the first one. The floor is yours.
Okay, so hello, I'm Arthur. Someone brought this subject about out-of-the-box monitoring and alerting for virtual machines on KubeVirt. So I tried to work on that, and I've noticed that we are missing some metrics, some really important metrics for if someone is properly wanting to monitor a virtual machine, like swap usage and disk usage and some other things. And then I've asked it at the KubeVirt dev channel if someone knows how to export this metric from libvirt, and it looks like it's not possible. So what I wanted to ask is, should we even implement this alerting if we do not have enough metrics, like just create alerts for network monitoring and memory usage? It doesn't look like it's enough. Should we do that, or should we just leave VMI monitoring to the users?
Don't we have? Sorry.
Daniel, go on.
I'm pretty sure that we do have something that monitors at least the network usage, well, of the VMI pod at least, and the disk usage. I'm not sure about it, but
the network, yes, we have some really good metrics for network, but disk usage, we do not have like total amount of disk space, the total amount used. We just have like total amount of IO and some other operations, but not really space.
okay.
I guess that you're getting here in an area where it's difficult to say what is good and bad, and if we should throw an error or not. Because if you look at a disk, I mean, there is then a partition on it, or multiple partitions, and it's formatted in some way. So from outside, you do not even necessarily see how full it is or what it means for the VM, if it's full or not, right? So, I mean, I'm not sure if you understand what I mean. And the same probably applies for memory and CPU to a degree, because is it now good or bad if a VM uses all the CPUs which you give to it? Do you expect that it's used up to 80% or 90%, and this is exactly what you want because you want it to be used and do the task, or is this already a concern? So I guess there may be some patterns which make sense for a broader audience. I personally just don't know that. Did we consider something like, it might make sense to try to collaborate in an extra repo or something on various patterns, which may make sense. So, but more like examples, which you can post in or something. I'm a little bit unsure what the right thing to do is here.
Yeah, I was about to suggest maybe writing either a blog post in the KubeVirt website, or maybe in the examples directory, add some example with the VMI and monitoring rules. that we can deploy, just to let the user know that he can do it if he wants to. Maybe documentation that explains how to do it. But I agree with Roman here. We can't decide for the users what is good or bad for their specific workloads.
Okay, I was just thinking because there is some pod, like I think OpenShift already creates alerts for pods, and I think VMI could follow the same pattern, and we could create alerts for VMIs as well. I don't know if we should create if the metrics we have are not enough. So I think while we are talking, I think we decided that we should not, right?
Well, for me, it's hard to say. It really. So if OpenShift does it, for instance, on CPU and memory, and I think Overt has at least which can also manage virtual machines, has at least in the overview some hints that the VM uses a lot of CPU and memory. It may make sense. I'm just not sure. Maybe we should just go to KubeVirt Devil there and ask people what they expect and make some suggestions which we think makes sense. It would be nice to have a little bit out of the box so that not every user has to re-implement the wheel himself. So I wouldn't say no. At this point, it's just a little bit hard for me to say what we would definitely need and what we should definitely not do.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'll ask on KubeVirt mailing list what the others think about it.
It may also make sense to look at OpenStack and Overt to see what they're doing, what they consider healthy and not healthy. Since I mean they deal with VMs.
Do you know where can I see it?
So regarding to OpenStack, Vladik, who is a maintainer on KubeVirt 2, is a pretty good source when it comes to tracking down code in OpenStack and checking what OpenStack does. So maybe you can try pinging Vladik Romanovsky on Slack.
Okay, thank you. I'll definitely do it.
Thank you.
I also see that someone added a note here in the notes on this topic about Prometheus node exporter. I don't think we mentioned that.
Oh, yeah, I think it was not me who added it, but it is possible for users to deploy Prometheus node exporter on their VMs, and they do the monitoring themselves. So they can monitor. We don't need to do it, but yeah.
Yeah,
Right. Okay.
I think the advantage with this is that you definitely get all the metrics regarding to disks and so on, right? Immediately. Disadvantage is that users have to configure them to their needs. It may also make sense that we provide some examples on how to create nice integrated alerts if they use the node exporter in the context of KubeVirt. It's also a possibility. I don't know.
Cool.
Okay, thanks. So the next topic in the agenda is from Daniel. Sorry, yes, Daniel. Reducing image size.
Yeah, it is actually not exactly my topic. It is something that I was requested to raise here by Shaul. I'm not sure if he's in this meeting right now, but he asked me to raise it.
I'm here. I'm here.
So you can talk about it, and I will put your name instead of mine on the.
Okay. So 1 second, let me connect my headphones so the kids will not interfere. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So basically, in a previous place that I was working, we looked for ways to reduce the cost when going up the cloud with a certain product. And one of the things that I found was the ability to use Docker Slim, which reduced the size of the image. So the Docker Slim is it's an industry level tool that allows you to use it in order to reduce the size of the image by reducing certain dependencies that are not required. It also allows better security aspects, and the idea here is whether we can use it. Now, in the open source in KubeVirt, we are going out from Fedora image, and basically we're using it only because we are required to do SSH into the container and maybe some additional functionalities. And the proposal is to go out from scratch and add only the dependencies that are really required. Now think about having even 10 megabytes, and you have a lot of environments that are used for your customer, like testing the existing version, testing the next version, pre-prod, performance testing, production, of course. All of this, when going to the cloud, will cost a lot of money for the storage. And even reducing 10 megabytes, and I'm pretty sure that maybe we can reduce more, can reduce the costs of the product. And this is the main idea.
So what I can say here is that for most binaries, we would not need to use Fedora base image. There I would just go for the distress images, which come with Bazel anyway, like for Virt API, Virt controller, and so on. And then we have Virt handler and Virt launcher, where especially Virt launcher needs libvirt. And this means that we need to install libvirt via RPM packages with all its dependencies. And maybe Docker Slim can save to something. I'm not sure if it's significant enough, and I would personally prefer a more predictable approach in general. So even if it helps something, what I always see as a huge disadvantage about all this is that RPMs just change all the time, and for me this just adds another unpredictability layer where it does something where the result is not clear to me. And I would instead prefer if we would just really install the RPMs which are needed, and don't even have all the other RPMs inside which come with it with Fedora out of the box. Yeah, this would be
So
my
I'm looking at Docker Slim. It seems like one of the, well, I could be wrong. I literally just Googled it while we were talking about it. One of the advantages, it looks like maybe it's squashing layers together, which depending on how the image was built, could really offer some reduction of the size. But we're pretty good about that already, where we aren't introducing multiple layers and just making little changes to large files or anything like that. So I'm not sure if it would benefit us, given how knowledgeable we already are of how this layering works and how we've kind of done our best to minimize anything that might cause a bloat today.
By the way, there can be an interesting side effect with this, that because basically Virt handler, Virt launcher, and the cluster components would require different components, which would mean that we may end up with completely different layers, and at the end we may even pull more to the nodes than otherwise. Because when we have the same base image, they'll just pull the same base and then just the binary on top, basically.
Yeah, and another problem that can be with the Docker Slim is that, well, I'm not an expert with this, but from what I read, it requires some interactions with during the build time. So you build your container and then you run some interactions with your component, and then it analyzes which packages are needed and which ones are not. And then we risking it deleting some packages that we do need because unless we actually statically compile everything, and then we're going back again into this scenario with the scratch image. But it can, for example, delete some networking package that we do need from the image.
Honestly, I would more go into the direction, try to get predictable images for the containers where we need libvirt, and the rest just go to the display space image where we just have the Golang static binary, which we could do any moment instead of introducing an extra tool. Joel?
Sorry, I didn't know that you are referring to me. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, I just said,
Roman?
I'm not sure if, since the benefits are not entirely clear, and we can, except from Virt Launcher, already used and handled distroless base images, which basically just contain the static Go binary. I personally would be more interested in making Virt Launcher more predictable and just install the RPMs which are needed instead of trying to use this magic tool. That's my personal opinion.
What about going out from scratch image?
Yeah, for that, for going out from it. So as I said, for the cluster level, we already can use distroless. Distroless is basically scratch. I mean, there are 2 megabytes in there or something, but we can also completely statically compile the Go binary, including the glibc dependency, and then we can have complete scratch, but there is not much difference because then the binary is bigger, right? And so having glibc in the distroless image or just compiling in all dependencies with the Go binary is not so much difference. And yeah,
there's only one point that I'm a little bit afraid of, is that if we'll do it from scratch or something like that and not from a distro, then we have a problem with debugging and troubleshooting, because currently we are connecting to the pods and trying to work there from time to time to debug problems. And if there will be nothing there except a binary, then this is really challenging. We will have to find ways and tools to see what is going on there.
I think for the cluster scope things where we could right now just use binaries, that is Virt controller, Virt API, and Virt operator. There's absolutely no need to ever exec into it. It's because it just connects to the Kubernetes cluster and does something. And if it doesn't work, you see the error output from that interaction. It's definitely more an issue for Virt handler and Virt launcher. And there, my preferred way would be to ensure that tar is in the binary, in the container, because when tar is there, you can just use OC or kubectl CP to copy in a static bash or something, and then you can just run a bash into the debugging. But I'm anyway not sure if we have libvirt in a container, if we can then, for instance, remove bash at all. So I would leave that here on the node level. I'm not so much interested, for instance, in also not having bash in there. So it's more on the cluster level. It's absolutely not needed. At least when I install libvirt and do the dependency resolution through one or the other dependency, bash gets pulled in.
Still, I believe, troubleshooting is kind of a side story, according to the topic we're discussing. But, the main question, if I understood, is what would be the advantage of, or potential advantage of Docker Slim over just using Scratch images wherever possible. And
I mean, with Scratch images are, from my perspective, if you don't need to enter it for debugging, the best. And with Docker, what Docker Slim can give you is that for other cases, where you, for instance, need to use a package manager first, like DNF or Yarn or whatever you want, you most of the time need some base operating system in the container already to install packages and prepare it some other way. And then you always have the issue of getting rid of it. I mean, there's this.
Sure, maybe I didn't make it. I think that my question was more for Shaul in terms of the original proposal. In terms of if Shaul, if you can help clarify what would be the advantage of using Docker Slim over that approach of limiting, well, starting from scratch wherever possible and keeping images as minimal as possible.
I cannot state it. I think something like this will require some proof of concept in order to understand exactly what we are getting and if it will work. Other than that, it's a guess. Same like Roman says, when we are running with the Docker Slim, we don't really know what is getting removed, unlike going out from scratch and adding only the things that we need. But the main idea here
I think we lost you.
was to by reducing the size of the images. So both options for my side, sorry, I will repeat. I said both options for my side are talking about the same idea eventually, which is reducing the cost by reducing the size of the images and going to the cloud. This is something that impacts the customers, and this is what we want to see if we can achieve. Other than that, I think only POC can provide the answers. So this can be an issue for the community to see if someone wants to handle it, to grab it, and see and try to do some POC and see if it is working and what are the results for it.
Okay. Make a note here. Any other comments about that topic? No? If not, while I write this down, we can move on to the next one, which is from Chris about documentation.
Hi, everybody. I don't want to go into the gory details about documentation retooling. I just want to bring awareness that it is happening, and if you'd like to help out, there's a GitHub issue that I linked to in the meeting notes, and so far feedback has been good from KubeVirt dev and thumbs up in the issue.
Okay, I will actually add, I'll take the opportunity to add something more to that topic, because, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the issue so far has been focused on the tools for the documentation and the rendering, etc. But there is a bigger or potentially bigger issue to discuss, which is the multiple sources of documentation. So the issue is focused on the user guide, but one of the challenges to resolve is that there is documentation about different components in different repos. There is a mix of end user focused documentation with contributor focused documentation in multiple places. And that's something that would need to be addressed is how to put some order into this, some organization in the overall, the whole documentation, not just the user guide.
Yes, that is going to be a problem. And at some point, we're going to have to address it.
Okay, I guess we will look at it in more detail and come up with a proposal.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Any comments or questions about that? Okay. Next topic, Edward.
Yes, hi. So there was a contribution pull request asking to fix an IP address thing that we are exposing through the VMI status, the IP addresses of the interfaces, with or without the guest agent. I think in the case of if we don't have a guest agent, only the pod network IP address is reported, and it is reported without the prefix and the masks. And if there is a guest agent, it is reported with the prefix and the mask, and it also the other interfaces, if there are any, are also reported. And the PRs ask to remove the mask from the, so we'll never report the mask in general, if there is a guest agent and if there isn't. So my question is, what everyone think about this point, because from my knowledge on other places, the mask is very important, mainly when there are multiple interfaces. When there is one, like in a pod, it doesn't matter really. But when there are multiple ones that can overlap and stuff like that, it is important to have the mask on one hand, but on the other hand, we need to be consistent in that reporting. So without the guest agent, for example, what we will do. So that's the question. What do you think? By the way, it's maybe that's a technicality. If I understand correctly from the implementation itself, we could report the mask even if we don't have the guest agent for the pod network, because we're not reading it from the pod itself.
Well, I think I personally agree with you that the mask is an important information if you have multiple IPs. For all the cases like where you're thinking about the usual pod cases, I mean, you mentioned it already with the pod network, right? You would use the IP and the IPs field and expect there the IPv4 and IPv6 address to be there. The question is now if we want to diverge from that on the VMI with also adding the mask there or not. So far, we actually did not. This was more like an accident that the guest agent edited with the mask there. But the net mask is important. It's more a question now if we should separate it out in a new field or report everything with the mask. The mask is not important for many cases in KubeVirt, like for the pod network, IPv4, IPv6. For Malthus, where you're not passing through the bridge, so where you're just using other CNI plugins. And yeah, if we use Masquerade, we would have to report it from the mask from somewhere else. I don't know. But it's more a question for me on how to best express it. I completely agree with you that the mask is important.
So there was like I think that the proposal was one proposal was to have an additional list of addresses that it is in another place, like maybe things that are coming explicitly from guest agent, and report there everything, like including the mask. But the question is, I personally like it less that we need to report something twice. It's like duplicating the data, and then it can confuse even more the API. But can you just clarify in which cases it's less important? I do understand why in the pod it is less important, because they don't report
So-
it at all. So
For everything where we don't use our own CNI or there are the CNI plugins which are hosted inside KubeVirt, right? With the CNI plugin operator, with the Malthus operator. And so there exist some CNI plugins which pass through layer 2 networking, bridges or whatever, and we support it like that. It just supports the bridge and doesn't assign any IP. In this case, the netmask is important. For the others, it's more like on a pod, there's just an IP and you're supposed to know what this IP is for, right? So it's not just the pod network, it's basically all Multus networks which are created for CNI, for all CNI Multus integrations where you do the same like for the pod network.
but I think that the Kubernetes API is not, if I understood correctly, the Kubernetes API of the pod only exposes the pod network. That's it, and the reason for that is just to have access to the pod itself. But the Multus one, I mean, secondary networks are exposed in some hacky way using annotations, and even in the status they are. I don't know where exactly, but they also use annotation to report it
It
back.
would be interesting if in that annotation you see the netmask.
I checked
Because-
it earlier this week, and you don't. But my suspicion is that it just reports what's returned from the CNI, and there is like no clear API for that. So relying on it can be great, I guess.
It's also interesting, like the fact that I think when I look at so this is like maybe a philosophical question. When you look on the VMI object itself, the question is, what do you see there? Do you see what is in the VM? What it reflects what we think there is in the VM, or is it tries to reflect what is in a different place? So this is like also.
So I can tell you what it tries to do. If the guest agent is a good source to add values, there is another question, but it's not supposed to be a guest agent information place. It's supposed to be a place where you see the information so that you can create controllers or other objects based on it. Just as an example, a virtual machine instance service would be such an example, which could then, like a service in Kubernetes, do something for you. So it's mostly meant for kind of automated processes, or I mean, it can also be used for humans, but it's meant to be kind of a source which gives you value for establishing communication paths, like the API, like the APM pods, which is used for services, the kubelet, and all, kubectl and all the others. So if we really want to just express what the guest sees, I would say this is not the place for it. I mean, the guest could help to enrich it.
Okay.
One thing that maybe like render the need for netmasks lower is that the API shows IP addresses that are like for a specific network. So say I request secondary networks called blue, then the API tells me on this network blue, the IP address of this VM is that. So if you assume that these VMs are on the network blue are on the same subnet because they are on the same network, if you make this assumption, then you don't need the subnet because you know that it's on this specific interface on this specific network.
Yeah. I mean, it's perfectly fine to have switches which support the subnets, right? And you can configure them on their IPs and so on. So it could happen still. So I think it makes sense to expose it somehow. I'm not sure if here is the right place. That's my thing. At least it wasn't intended to be so much like this as well. It was more intended to be like the Kubernetes pod.
Okay. So a side question, is is there if a CNI sets an IP address on secondary API or secondary interfaces, is there a mechanism to pass them into the VM as well?
Yes,
Or
it's the same one as for the.
Yes, this is the same one.
masquerade.
So we
Yes.
expect the same, to have the same thing.
Yeah, but it depends. If you have a binding mechanism like Masquerade that hides the internal IP address, we just expose the one that was set on the pod IP. But for other bindings like the bridge one or SRV, we look inside the guest.
Yeah, because we simply don't know it from the outside, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So we try to enrich it there. I mean, it can probably be discussed if that's a good thing. Maybe we should just not show these and have them in an extra section which clearly shows that this is coming from the guest agent and maybe less reliable. I don't know.
Yeah, that was what I'm trying to understand, if that is the better solution than to have. I mean, you could say that we'll have a guest agent section, and that one will report you the interfaces that the guest agent sees, and if there is not, then we will report something else and in a different place. So maybe even that will show you the correlates between them. So, because I think that the guest agent information usually is also valuable much for the operator, not only for automation for services. So if an operator wants to see what's going on inside the VM from the outside, then he may look in the guest agent information. That's one of the, it's like a peeking in to see what's going on there and helping maybe his customer to solve some problems.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I also have the feeling that separate. I mean, it may still make sense to enrich IP's field with the help of something inside the guest. Why not? I mean, if we think it's good enough or it doesn't have too big security implications or something. But apart from that, it may make sense to clearly also have a separate section which just shows what's inside the guest.
Okay, thanks.
So the result is that we want to strip this prefix length in that PR, and if we want to introduce netmask, it would be a different APR, a follow-up discussion. But for that specific PR, we want to drop it.
I mean, what I'm not clear about is the CEDR notation used right now outside of KubeVirt already to have the extra information for something.
I don't think we would be able to tell until somebody reports a bug on that one.
So we don't know, at least.
Yep.
It's not clearly used, at least.
I'm not aware of anybody who would be using it. Yes.
But I guess if we give them an alternative or at least a ticket that tracks it, then it's enough, right?
Yeah,
I
release
think
note, documenting it, that starting from that version, if you were if you were relying on the wrong fully reported masks there is now a new place where you can clearly see them, stuff like this, right?
Yeah, the only thing that I think we should continue on the discussion, or maybe after, is it valuable? Just to understand if it is really valuable to have the list of IP addresses in the VMI without the mask, or if the answer is yes for the automation stuff, services, stuff like that, then fine. But this is the only thing that I'm not sure yet.
I think for any Kubernetes conformance CNI plugin, in the sense that it could also be used for the pod network as the primary source, just reporting the IP is accurate, because this is the thing which has a meaning from the Kubernetes perspective.
Okay.
But for SRIOV, bridge pass through and so on, I think it can even be essential that you also see the net mask, right?
Yeah, but we still try to report it in the same place. So
yeah.
This is like it feels like we are in a junction that what is the common thing that helps everyone. So I would argue in general, like I will even never thought about reporting only the IP without the mask in the first place, but because we are in the ecosystem, and you are saying that someone may don't expect it there because this is not how Kubernetes works, then maybe that's the correct thing. I'm just you know
I
it
guess
better, so
if we would have reported it from the beginning, it may also be fine. We just didn't. So I guess 98% or 99% of our users never saw anything reported with a net mask there.
okay.
That's so. I guess it's also what I try to do is also trying to find out what is the smaller API break. Let me phrase it this way. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I guess so. Yes.
Okay, I have a logistics question. Do you guys have a link to that PR you're talking about? If you could add it to the notes, that would be helpful for.
I will add it to the notes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comment or question about that topic? Okay, well, up next in the open floor, Roman, parallel test execution. Are we fast?
Yeah, we're never fast enough, of course. Yeah, just wanted to summarize what I also wrote to the KubeVirt dev list, that the PR got merged last Thursday, I think, and since then tests are, at least half of the tests which we run are executed in parallel. As hoped, no really measurable effect happened on the CI infrastructure. There was, due to the change test order, one test which was failing pretty often, that we feel the real bug in KubeVirt, which is fixed now too since Friday. It takes roughly 1 hour per lane, but if you see anything strange or so on, please definitely report it. There can always be more which is related to this change, but I think so far it looked good. And apart from that, after it's running for some time, I'm happy to hear if taking away 1 hour changes anything notably regarding to the developer experience, or if, I mean, there are much more tests which we can parallelize, but I'm also trying to get a feeling how, what would be a good baseline so that people feel comfortable with that, or if they even feel any improvement at all. I mean, we're still at 3 hours, right? So it's from 4 to 3 hours, at least for most lanes. Maybe that doesn't change anything from the feeling in 3 hours. It's still as bad from the perception. Yeah.
I just noticed that the number of opened PRs on KubeVirt dropped below 100 after like months of being above it. So maybe that's the result of it already.
Maybe that's maybe me who closed 5 of his old pull requests, which he doesn't want to get merged. I don't know.
Yeah, just be careful with these numbers, because last time I remember that we dropped below 100. It was because something allowed it to pass wrongly. So that's when I see something too good, I'm already pessimistic here. But
yeah, just to repeat, I closed 5 PRs today, which I don't want to get merged. So this helped getting under that number.
I'm more interested in actually if people get to debug stuff during this with this parallel. I would like to hear some feedback on that, because that's where I feel there will be some challenges. So if someone who is debugged in the last week, or you will debug in the next weeks, I would be glad to hear his experience with this.
Yeah, very good point.
Oh, sorry, I double-clicked and I was on mute again. Okay. anything else about that topic or any other topic? We don't have any other on the list. Going once, going twice. No? Okay, then thank you everyone for your time today, and let's see you online and next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
But